So, welcome everyone. Welcome to this very special session with Shabnam Virmani. Before I introduce Shabnam, I just wanted to quickly introduce people who are new to the quarantine train to what we are all about. The Quarantine Train is a writers' collective dedicated to preservation, critique, creation, and appreciation of poetry and fiction from around the world. We began as a moment to offer solidarity to poets during the time of quarantine, but we quickly became very immersed and involved with each other, and this has gone on from then for a couple of years now. We meet every week to discuss, appreciate, critique, and learn from each other. We also conduct masterclasses, book launches, and a very special thing happened in 2020. The Dipankar Khivani Memorial Prize was introduced by the Quarantine Train to promote Anglophone poetry in India and to honor the memory of a beloved poet, Dipankar Khivani. This event that we have today is in connection to that prize. Ways of Verse is a small festival we have put together to commemorate the Dipankar Khivani Prize and also use this occasion to reflect on the meaning and place of poetry in our contemporary worlds. And who better to do that with us than Shabnam Virmani? Uh, I work with Shabnam. I'm a good friend of Shabnam's, and it's a delight. But we've never done this together before.
That's true.
This is the first, although we've had endless conversations, and it is Shabnam's spirit of sharing, generous sharing, which I think motivated us to, call Shabnam here. And also, of course, her extensive work into the world of poetry, which a lot of us modern sort of poets might look with a bit of envy. We often, say that, poetry is dying, nobody is reading poetry, nobody is, engaged in poetry. But clearly that's not true in the oral traditions of Bhakti and Sufi, where poetry is enmeshed in people's lives. And that's what Shabnam's four sort of extremely moving and I would say landmark documentary films show us. She's made four films, started with four films: Had Anhad, Koi Sunta Hai, Chalo Hamara Desh, and Kabira Khada Bazaar Mein, which explored the Kabir that is living with people today in various forms and shapes, in various ways and embodiments. And today, Shabnam will take us into that exploration. Of course, Shabnam has done many other things. She is a singer herself called One Palace and Thousand Doorways. Today, Shabnam has titled her talk very intriguingly, and I also don't know where she'll take that. She's called it The Spark That Lit the World. So I invite Shabnam now to share with us her reflections and her thoughts about the spark that lit the world. And I request Sumit to take me away from the spotlight because it's scaring me only, my sleep.
Okay, thank you so much, Prashant, and the team of Quarantine Train for inviting me here. And I'm myself quite excited by this title, The Spark That Lit the World, possibly because it's a very new bhajan that has hit my consciousness very recently. And this phrase comes from one line of that song, and I hope to share that song today with you. So it's very fresh even for me. Even I will uncover and excavate the meanings of that song for the first time together with you, like this. So, yeah, this is a great opportunity to reflect on the form of the mystic poem or song, in a sense. A kind of a self reflexive moment where we are not talking about what the poem calls us to, but rather we are casting a gaze on the poem itself, the the phenomenon of the oral traditions of mystic poetry. So I thought it might be instructive to start by mentioning that it's interesting that we call it mystic poetry, but in the parampara of the oral traditions in which this poetry flows, it is almost never called a kavita. I don't think I've ever, in these 2 decades of roaming around in the oral traditions of Bhakti, Sufi, Baul music, ever heard someone call this a kavita. It is called bani, among a few other terms. And the distinction is very clear and significant. The distinction is, this is not just any old poem. This is the word of the Guru, the word of the saint poet. And this is how people receive and relate to this body of verse. And what about the poets themselves? The poets, not all the saint poets that I have encountered refer to their act of poetry creation. I don't think Kabir does it that often. But Tukaram has written a lot about the fact that he's a poet. He's trying to express something and he's using words to do it. So how are the poets referring to their poems? And this is Tukaram, a 17th century Varkari Bhakti poet of Maharashtra, in an exquisite translation by Dilip Chitre. And here's what Tukaram says. To arrange words in some order is not the same thing as the inner poise. That's poetry. The truth of poetry is the truth of being. It's an experience of truth. No ornaments survive a crucible. Fire reveals only molten gold. Says Tuka, we are here to reveal. We do not waste words. So we might think this is a rather tall claim. Not just a poem, but a poem about the truth. And for those of us who may have tasted or dipped our toes into this tradition and had some kind of immersion in it, we will know what they mean when they say this. These are poems of the truth. Because this vast body of flowing oral poetry is received and participated in by people with a deep sense of, yes, this will nourish my life. Another word that Kabir uses for poetry or the poem is Shabad. We heard this word often enough, Shabad Kirtan. But interestingly, again, we are drawing distinctions between what is considered poetry in, say, modern times, and drawing distinctions between that tradition and what defines this vast body of hugely popular oral mystic poetry in our land. So Shabad is a poem, yes, but Shabad is also Shabd, which is the word. Shabd as in sound, Shabd as in vibration. So Shabd as in signaling the ultimate nature of reality, which is at its root vibration. So in a sense, what Kabir is saying, what the Kabir tradition signals with the word poem is something that slides from poem to word to sound to vibration to, again, truth, the nature of reality. So, and these boundaries begin to blur, in evocations of the term poem or shabd. Shabd kahan se uthta, kaho kahan ko jaye, हाथ पांव वाके नहीं, फिर कैसे पकड़ा जाए, नाभि कमल से उठता, शून्य में जाए समाए, हाथ पांव वाके नहीं, वो तो सूरत से पकड़ा जाए. From where does the poem word sound arise? Tell me, where does it go? It has no hands or feet. How will you catch its flow? Arising from the navel lotus, it goes into emptiness. It has no hands or feet. It's caught by your awareness. So here's an even taller claim being made by a poem. Not only is it about the truth, it is a bridge to the truth, in a sense. It is something that leads you into a deeper experience. Shah Latif, a Sindhi Sufi poet, says, what you think are poems are inklings from the unknown. They nudge me closer to my beloved. So we are faced with a very clear recognition here that this is not so much a literary experience as it is a kind of sadhana. It is poetry as practice. It is mobilizing poetry to create an experience in a tradition which I would like to argue is defined much more by the poetics of recognition rather than the poetics of originality. We as modern practitioners, creative artists, poets, we're always searching for our original voice, some original insight, some original idiom to assert ourselves, right? Whereas this tradition is actually quite antithetical to it. I think participants in this tradition, both as poets and listeners, are engaging in a body of verse that is already somewhat familiar. The meanings and the ideas being shared are not stunningly original. In fact, they are recognized. There is a pool of common motifs, images which float around. And when you hear that, you do an with a sense of recognition. So you return afresh to that which you already know, that which you want to continuously remind yourself about. And this is why the practice of this poetry is much more a sadhana, because there is an element of repetition in it. There is an element of return, an element of remembrance in it, which is why in satsang after satsang, these songs or poems bear repeating endlessly. And in fact, this is something that my students also pointed out to me when we started a forum called Gai Sopai, where I was teaching these songs to them. And one of them said, all the songs are saying the same thing. Actually, maybe that's not really accurate, because the songs are vast in the depths and breadth that they explore. And yet I know what that student meant. There is a common shared truth which is not original. We all know what that non-dual truth of the self is. And we come to this poetry because we want to remind ourselves. We want to sit here and recognize those meanings once again. We want to remind ourselves, albeit with new beautiful metaphors and twists and turns and moments and textures and emotions. There's so much diversity in the tradition. And yet it's always, always, always pointing us to one kind of experience that we hunger for, that we keep returning to this poetry for. So I would say this is one core difference between modern poetry practitioners and, say, the mystic tradition, which I think engages in poetry as a kind of praxis, a kind of a practice. So And another term used in the tradition for the poem is bhajan, which significantly not only means song, but it also means meditation, bhajna. So again, we are seeing signals to how this body of poetry is much, it is equally sadhana or practice as it is literary delight. Let's put it this way. I don't want to create a duality and privilege one over the other. The other interesting thing about this poetry is, I mean, it's true, I started out by saying that this is no ordinary poetry or poem. It is the word of the Guru. And yet, in what feels like a sort of a paradox, I think the relationship of the person who receives this poem song to the poet is not reverential necessarily. It's a very intimate relationship. The idiom of the bhakti movement is personal and intimate. God is your lover, God is your friend, God is your child. And so, yes, there is that reverence to the word of the Guru, the Bani, as it certainly is there in the Sikh tradition. It's very hallowed, there's a book for it and all of that. But I'm coming from my experience of the oral traditions as they are performed and practiced and engaged in on the ground in the villages, outside of any structured religious, spiritual frameworks. And I feel that the bhakta, the one who loves to listen to this poem song, is treating the poet much more as a sahridaya. And I'm drawing this term from Indian aesthetics, specifically from the writings of Mysore Hiriyana, a Sanskrit scholar and philosopher, where he will say that you experience the poet as a sahridaya, one who gives voice, who is of the same heart, sahridaya, someone who is of the same heart. So what does he say? Every lover of this poetry is virtually the poet. Both possess the poetic heart. In one, it pulses more strongly than in another. The poet feels the finer aspects of things so intensely and vividly and spontaneously gives it utterance. The listener, we feel the same things, but in a similar circumstance, we are struck dumb. Everyone has poetic feelings that they need poets to assist them to express. And the experience is that of the tiny stream seeking to reach the ocean, but being too feeble to do so. It needs to mingle with a mighty river in order to reach the ocean. So the experience of this poetry, he will argue, is for a fuller self-revelation. We seek the aid of a Sahridaya poet, Kabir or Meera or others. They're just like us. They're not gods or gurus at one level. They're just like us. They just have the words for the same experience that I glimpse. I have it. I need your assistance to seek that self-revelation. So it is this insight that made me also understand that rather odd claim by somebody I met once in the tradition who said, "Arey bhai, Kabir to hum bhi hain." I keep quoting this in all my talks. I often mention this because I was so struck by what is this man saying? I'm asking him about what did Kabir mean? What did Kabir say? Where does Kabir whatever? And he stops me in the middle and he says, "Arey Kabir to hum bhi hain." You know, that sense of intimacy with a Sahridaya, that is what is expressed. A sense that what he had tasted, experienced, I do too. He has the words for it, I don't. So I'm going to stop here and show you a small clip from, 3-minute clip from a video, one of the Kabir films, Koi Sunta Hai, where I meet somebody in Just give me a minute. In the village of Lunia Khedi, and he is, this is Prahlad Tipaniaji's village, who's a renowned singer of Kabir and a guru to me in many ways. And this was the morning after, this was the morning chai moment, morning after a big utsav to Kabir in the village. I hope the video and audio is clear.
Yes, it's clear, Shabnam.
बासाब, आप कल भजन गा रहे थे?
मेरा नाम?
हाँ, नाम क्या है आप?
रायचंद है मेरा नाम।
अच्छा,
सबकी राय लेता फिर हूँ मैं।
कल गा रहे थे आप कबीर भजन, वो सुनाइए।
कौन? मारी काया नगर का साथी हूँ, बोलूंगा नहीं दिन राती। यो बहुसागर ऊंडो घणो देखत फाटे मारी छाती। सत्य गुरु ने मारी बाँह पकड़ ली तो फोकड़े में बह जाती। मारी काया नगर का साथी हूँ, बोलूंगा नहीं दिन राती। लख 84 सब मन भुगती, कीड़ा मकोड़ा गज हाथी। लख 84 सब मन भुगती, कीड़ा मकोड़ा गज हाथी। मानस दान अमोलक पाया, अब साचा मिलो संगति। झूठा मत मिल जो, मारी काया नगर का साथी हूँ, बोलूंगा नहीं दिन राती। यह माया सबसे बड़ी डाकण, सटा बढ़ा के खाई जाती। पर यो मन मारो गणो हटीलो जैसो मकनो हाथी। इन माया के कहीं नहीं समझे हूँ। अब गई जवानी है, ये बुढ़ापो काया झुर झुर रोती। साहेब कबीर अरज मारी सुन लो, करूं आपसे विनती। मारी काया नगर का साथी हूँ, भूलूंगा नहीं दिन रात। यह छाप है।
ये आपने लिखा?
हाँ, बैठे बैठे लिखा करूँ। ऐसो कवि तो नहीं है हूँ, पर हाँ बैठे बैठे लिखा करूँ। पढ़ाई अच्छी कर लो। हाँ, फर्स्ट नंबर पास आना चाहिए। एक आधो साइंस लो। हाँ,
गुरु की निशानी अलख जन्म्या गल पवना हर बाणी रे बाणी।
So, I wanted to show that video to signal this quality of intimacy. Here's an example of someone who is not only listening and imbibing the words of the poet, but also creating his own poems. And the intimacy of this act of writing, listening, participating in this tradition is also one that connects you to your ancestors, to an entire culture, to people, scores and scores of people participating in this tradition right now before you. And it frees you in a sense of the need for an authorship, an original signature, the need for your signature as a poet, you know. The song he recited for us doesn't have his name, and it's kind of a tribute to Kabir. So to know that this body of verse is really not one person, Kabir, that historical person, but many, many, many people who are participating in it outside of the prison gates of the self. You know, they're in a, they have relinquished authorship and gained some freedom in the process, you know. So it's in these many ways that this poetic tradition, I would say, is sort of mass scale psychotherapy. It is a therapeutic tradition. People derive incredible solace from this poetry, and they turn to it in the most intimate moments of their lives. You know, it's like a girl met me the other day who was going through a very painful breakup, and she said, Fariduddin Ayaz singing Bhala hua mori gagri phuti, main panya bharan se chuti. It has rescued me from this moment. You know, it's just as well my pitcher shattered. I'm free of the burden of having to fill water. So it sort of worms itself, sort of finds its way into the narrowest interstices of your lived experience. The narrowest cracks get filled by the waters of this poetry, and it's always there as an intimate guide, not only making you feel good. It's not a feel-good psychotherapy movement. It has as much disquiet in it as it does solace. And I want to share with you another 3-minute clip from another film, Kabira Khada Bazaar Mein, where you'll meet a very different person. This is Vivek Das, who speaks about a poem that changed his life in quite significant ways. And he was a Naxalwadi, revolutionary, working in the villages of Bihar. And I meet him here in, again, Lunia Khedi village, at another moment in that same Utsav, where he's speaking to the gathering. Okay, here goes.
सदगुरु कबीर साहब आपके मसीहा थे। कबीर साहब के जमाने में हमें बात करने नहीं दिया जाता था। मंदिर में आपको जाने का अधिकार नहीं था। उन्होंने कहा कि मंदिर में भगवान नहीं है। तो भगवान कहाँ है? भगवान आपके पास में है, आपके हृदय में है, आपके घट में विराजमान है।
आप फ्री हैं?
हाँ, फ्री हूँ।
हम आए ऊपर?
बस निकल रहा हूँ मैं।
ओ, निकल रहे हैं?
हाँ, एकदम देखते हो सब। मैं बस आसन बासन कच्चे बांध लिया।
अच्छा, कुछ देर हमारे साथ बिता के फिर निकलिए।
ठीक है।
हाँ, आए।
मेरी माँ बहुत परेशान होने लगी कि किसी तरह से ये रास्ता छोड़ दे। कोई देवता के पास जाती थी, कहीं मंदिर में जाती थी, कहीं पूजा करती थी कि ये इसके कारण भी कहीं से बदलाव हो जाए। एक कबीरपंथी साधु कोई आए उस गाँव में। वो गांव में आया तो बोली होगी मेरी माँ कि हमारा बेटा ऐसे ऐसे बिगड़ गया है, गलत रास्ते पे चल रहे हैं और हो सकता है उसको पुलिस काउंटर करके मार देगी, लोग भी मार देंगे, जमींदार मरवा देंगे, तो आप इसको सुधार सकते हैं। उन्होंने कहा कि ठीक, हम कर देंगे, लेकिन आपको एक सत्संग कराना पड़ेगा अपने घर में। मैं गया, वहाँ तो एक भजन हो रहा था। आज भी वो हमारे लिए वो आदर्श पद है। उसी को मैं प्रेरणा मानता हूँ कबीर पंथ में प्रवेश करने का, द्वार मानता हूँ। ये द्वार यहाँ से खुला और हम कबीर पंथ में प्रवेश कर गए। रहना नहीं देश बिराना है, ये संसार झार और झाखड़, आग लगी बर जाना है। ये संसार कांटों की बारी, उरज पुरज मर जाना है। ये संसार कागज की पुड़िया, बूंद पड़े गुल जाना है। कहत कबीर सुनो भय साधु सदगुरु नाम ठिकाना।
और भाई चोट है आसमान की, गुरु ज्ञान की, सतनाम की। हर हर मारुआ निशानो साधु, चोट है आसमान की।
वहीं से मेरा मन लगा कि बदला कि मैं जिस गरीबों के लिए, जिस छोटे लोगों के लिए, जिस निरीह लोगों के लिए जो लड़ाई लड़ रहा हूँ, जो काम कर रहा हूँ, मुझे कहीं न कहीं उस दो साथियों में ये असर आया कि कबीर साहब को लगता है कि ये इन बातों से भी, इन पक्षों से भी, इन आंदोलनों से भी बड़ा आदमी हैं, बड़ी बात कर रहे हैं। क्योंकि यहाँ पर देखा कि वहाँ मारपीट की नौबत है, मारकाट की बातें हैं, हिंसा की बातें हैं, और कबीर उससे विपरीत अहिंसा से लोगों का मन बदलने चाहते हैं, विचार बदलने चाहते हैं, परिवेश बदलने चाहते हैं। हमारा जो अंतर पड़ा बीच में, इस पर मैं खिलाफ हुआ। जैसे मेरे पास 200 लोग हैं, संगठन है, शक्ति है, हमारे सामने ये बाबा खड़े हो रहे हैं। क्यों खड़े हो रहे हैं? अच्छा रेल जाओ, उठा के ले आओ। तो ये बाबा ने हमारा कुछ नहीं बिगाड़ा, लेकिन हमारे पास ताकत है, हमारे पास शक्ति है, हमारे पास संगठन है। बाबा का गला काट के फेंक दो, कुछ नहीं करते।
कबीर साहब की बोली को महाराज जी ने गोली से भी ज्यादा मजबूत समझा।
कर लो न मन की सरकार जी। अरे भाई सब दारी डाल कर लो, सब दारी डाल कर लो, गोली लागी ज्ञान की। हर हर मारुआ निशानो साधु, चोट है आसमान की।
पनिया जी,
So, I wanted to show that little clip because just to give you a little taste of the why this poetry is even why the phrase exists in the tradition. It's called Shabd ki chot because it's something that wounds you. It's not only solace and feel good, whatever. It's something that actually is transformative. It can turn your world upside down. It can totally change the course of your life because something strikes you in that moment. And of course, the other huge difference or significant thing about this vast body of flowing poems is that they're not just poems, printed, spoken, or recited, but they take flight on the wings of song. And it is the nature of, I mean, there are many things that can be said about what makes a printed poem that's read different from what the experience of hearing it or singing it yourself as a song. But I'm just going to focus on one core idea here, which is the song has the capacity to catch you by the scruff of your neck and bring you into the here and now. Much, much more compellingly than does a printed poem on a book. I think you have to will yourself to pause. You have to will yourself to step out of the frenetic rhythm of your life, the 6-lane highway of your mind, to appreciate, to meet a poem on its ground, on its territory. You can't read a poem in a book distractedly. It's just not going to do it for you. But a song will force you. A song is a conversation stopper, right? You'll break off mid-sentence because a strong song has come into the room, right? A song will force you to take that exit, that service lane exit off that 6-lane highway, busy highway, that is the mind. It will force you and bring you into, in some measure, the here and now, the vibrancy of this moment, make you intimate with it and created an altered state of reality for you. And so this song has the capacity to bring you into an intimacy with the present moment. And it's a powerful kind of intimacy. And here I'm going to borrow on a wonderful writer, Lata Mani, who's a historian, a critic, cultural critic, feminist historian, who said something in her book, Integral Nature of Things, which just struck me so powerfully. You know, she said, what is intimacy? Intimacy is common, in common parlance, we understand intimacy as something between two people, right? You and your lover, your family, your close friends, something very private, very niji, very personal, an emotional closeness, a sensuous, nourishing experience between two people. It's the kind of intimacy we hanker for, right? And it's outward in its orientation. And she says she has understood that this kind of intimacy, in a sense, cuts us off from the countless intimacies that everyday life offers us. And her insight is that intimacy is to be found in a subtle awareness of the present moment. You know, this sounds very casual and yeah, sure, present moment. But it is so darn difficult to enter that gate. That gate to the present moment is one not many of us take too often in a day, because our minds are always past, future, here, there, everywhere, but never really here and never really in the now. And she says, when you make that difficult entry into the portal of the present, that is intimacy. That is as nourishing, energizing, sensuous, soul nourishing as are commonly understood ideas of intimacy. And to do this demands, another big term in the Kabir oral tradition is jhina. It requires a subtlety, an awareness of subtlety, because it's not so easy, right? You begin to notice subtle things when you enter this moment. Where are my thoughts? Where are my emotions? What are the physical sensations here? What is the tactile landscape available to me right here, right now? What are my yearnings? What are my hankerings? What neediness is propelling me? There's a lot happening here in this present moment. And it takes subtlety to enter it. So I'm going to now share a song with you, which I'm very excited about. It's called Avatyu Che Jhinyu Jhinyu. I heard this song from Mandli from Gujarat, so it's got those Gujarati flavors. And I'm going to end my sharing today with this song. And then we can open it up for a conversation, and maybe at the end, if there's time, we'll do one more song. But anyway, Avatyu Che Jhinyu Jhinyu. These things are subtle, subtle. Koik Santa Virale Janiyu. The rare seeker, the rare saint understood. Mota kohada kaina kape, khabaru kadhavo tainliyu. Tema koi asaryo, lodha kape chhenyu. So he's saying, a kohada, kulhada, a bludgeon axe, can't slice through anything. Let's get to the bottom of this problem. No meaning is arising at all. But the iron that you are seeking to slice through is cleaved apart by a pinhead, by the point of a nail. We all know this without being hammersmiths or blacksmiths, that rocks can be split apart. But you need something fine, finely pointed. Virudi ma khane rani, jene guti lave kidiyu, makno hati haswa lagyo, dhandhan enyu kamaniyu. sugar scattered in the sand. Ants could trace, collect, and carry those crystals home. Watching this, the big Makno Hathi, the huge elephant, began to smile and applaud the ant for her earnings. So again, something very small, very subtle, very pointed can achieve that the big cannot. Kado kankari ladwa laga, vechma suttar feniyu, temathi ek tinkho udiyo, enyu jagma jutu felaniyu. The rock and the flint began to fight. Kado kankari ladwa laga. Vichma Suttar Feniyo. I did a little bit of research on this. Suttar is actually that char cloth, that very combustible, thin cloth, which has already been, heated and almost made to charcoal. It ignites very quickly. It's called a char cloth. That is between the rock and the flint. If that weren't there, there would be no fire. Nothing would ignite. That subtle presence between two heavy ideas, that which is in between, very subtle, that entity causes a spark to fly, which lights up the whole world. Temathi ek tinkho udiyo, jagma jutu felaniyu. So it's a really, to me, an extraordinary song that's signaling to us in the times we live in, which are so heavily flat-footed and grossly dualistic, where there is no space for a discourse that is subtle, that is not either or, yes, no, this, that. That is subtler reality. This song is pleading for the subtle, and it's saying, the nature of reality needs fine pincers of an ant to gather its truth, not the massive trunk of an elephant. The nature of reality can sometimes only be cleaved open by a pinhead, not a hammer. The nature of reality then ignites in our consciousness like a flash of recognition, something as subtle, refined as a tinder bundle, a char cloth. And when that happens, that intimate particular lights up the world. When your experience is very jhina, very subtle, very authentic, it is the whole. That particular is equally the universal. And that is when we feel intimately connected. Our experience is the experience of generations before us and generations to come. It's nothing new. It connects us with the whole cosmos. We are no longer alone. That's the spark that lights the world, that is sparked by a mystic song, often because it becomes a portal to the present moment. And that present moment can connect you to the eternal. So it ends this song by saying, Sadhu Sant Dui Begha Betha, Eni Sirga Purma Bhevium. Just two people sitting together. That space between them is Swarg itself, or Amrapur, the city beyond death. Keh Kabira sun bhai sadho, evi sachiyon rakho reniyu. Says Kabir, listen, keep truth for company. So again, it signals something very small, one interaction that can that has a kind of an exponential truth that can transpire.
छे संत विरड़े जानियो हर्जन विरड़े जानियो आवा त्यों छे झीण्यो झीण्यो अरे भाई कड़ो कंकरी लड़वा लाग्या विचमा सुत्तर फेणियों कड़ो कंकरी लड़वा लाग्या हाँ वचमा सुत्तर फेणियों तेमांथी एक तंखो उडियो जगमा जोत फैलाणियो जगमा जोत फैलाणियो आवा त्यों छे झीण्यो झीण्यो एक संत विरड़े जानियो हजन विरड़े जानियो आवा त्यों छे झीण्यो झीण्यो अरे भाई साधु संत दुई बेगा बैठा एनी सिर कपूर मां भेवियो साधु संत दुई बेगा बैठा एनी अमरापुर मां भेणियो के कबीरा सुन मेरे साधो एवी साचू राखो रेणियो आवा त्यों छे झीण्यो झीण्यो कोईक संत विरड़े जानियो हजन विरड़े जानियो आवा त्यों छे झीण्यो झीण्यो आवा त्यों छे झीण्यो झीण्यो राम So
I think I will take pause here, and I'd be very happy to have a conversation. I mean, I have more things to say, I could say, but really it's been an hour almost. So it'd be nicer if we open this up, maybe, Prashant?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Shabnam, for, I mean, I think there is a lot that we are going to take from today, especially I was really sort of, I thought that you sort of opened up the idea of intimacy in various ways, and especially something that, I mean, for people of the quarantine train might be very exciting is to think about the intimacy between the reader and the poet. And I think that's going to stay with me. But I'm sure people have a lot of questions, thoughts, reflections. So the floor is open. If anybody would like to ask a question, share a thought, please go ahead.
I would. My name is Shabnam Virmani. I would love to share my thoughts with Shabnam ji. That's all right?
Yes, yes, most certainly.
Hello, Shabnam. I am greatly humbled by your luminous imaginative capacity. Because in this time of spiritual havoc, it has become like metaphysical medicine. And particularly because it is experientially grounded, yet it gives us a taste of temporal eternity. And those auditory pilgrim trails that you open up for us with all these ancient voices For me, it proves that God is not just a figment of the imagination, but the imagination is a figment of God. So thank you very much. And if you would like to respond to that.
Wow, I can only applaud you at the luminosity of your expression. Thank you. Thank you for that sharing.
It just feeds off of your very poetic and very holy presence. So thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, Shabnam. This is Shobna here from TQT. I mean, words are pretty inadequate at this point. It's been so sublime, so beautiful. Some of our haiku friends are here who are not members of TQT, but we were just chatting about how haiku-esque this whole experience that you talk about of drawing the singer, the doer back to the moment is. I mean, this is something that we experience. I mean, we struggle with when we write haiku and haikai writing. So, I mean, it was almost like these two worlds were talking to each other.
Yes.
So, thank you very much for that.
And, Shobna, what you are saying is so true and therefore not surprising that so many of the Zen masters have chosen to speak in the haiku form. And these traditions are certainly resonant and echo each other in their experiential intimations, in what they are intimating to us.
And if I may just add one more thought that was running through, Mary Oliver's poetry is always looked at as sometimes too simplistic by a lot of people, but she is exactly, I would call, a Kabir poet of the West.
How
right? I mean, she speaks about the earth and the earthworm in just the manner that, I mean, in words that cannot be simplified further. And it was so similar to what you were talking about. So thank you so much for this.
Wonderful. Shobna, thank you for sharing that. I'll certainly look up Mary Oliver. But I'm reminded of a moment in a conversation with my friend Parvati Baul, who's this amazing singer from the Baul tradition. And she says, it is very, very, very difficult to be simple. And the simplicity, the seeming simplicity of a lot of this poetry is deceptive, for one who is on a practitioner's path. How should I put it? If you're serious about this poetry, then simple is very challenging. Thank you.
Vikas, would you like to share?
Yes, thank you, ma'am, for the session. Shabnam, ma'am, I wanted to ask about Kabir's son. Like, what are your impressions of Kamal? Kabir's son, Kamal. Yeah, if you can talk about him for a while. Yeah.
I actually don't know that much about Kamal. In fact, I'd like to hear what prompted your question to me. There is perhaps only one song from the Malwa oral tradition of Kabir, really zesty, feisty song by Kamal called Koi Mat Chhedo Re, which I have heard. The other reference to Kamal comes up is in a kind of a famous Doha exchange. There is a very famous poem by Kabir which says, Chalti chaki dekh kar diya Kabira roye, in do patan ke beech mein sabut bacha na koi. Watching the grinding stone whirl, Kabir weeps because no one was left whole. No grain was left whole between these two slabs. So, and then there is a famous retort to that by Kamal. Kamal says, that's what the lore says, that this is Kamal's poem. खिली खिली सब कहें, नहीं, चाकी चाकी सब कहें, खिली कहे ना कोई, जो खिली से लाग रहा वाको बाल ना बांका होए. That so he says, yeah, everybody's obsessing about the grinding stone, the chaki, but no, everybody's forgotten that center pin. And those grains or people that draw close to the center pin actually escape unbroken. So it's a very layered poem about the nature of existence, about duality, about how we get, how the sorrow of samsara, in a sense, is the crushing of that grain between dual slabs. And to exit that dual paradigm and to come to a central unitary idea of oneness that goes beyond the dual is the only ilaj, the only remedy from this sorrow of being crushed in the world. So that is very often attributed to Kamal. Other than this, I really don't know much about Kamal at all.
May I, Urmila?
Just 1 second, Urmila. Chaya had raised his hand, so I'll just go to Chaya and come back to you in 1 second.
Thank you, Prashant. Jigar also has a question here in the chat box.
Yeah. I'll take the. I'm keeping a track of the questions, Arjun. I'll bring it up.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. Chaya?
Yeah. Actually, Shabnam, I just wanted to ask, because this is what I've experienced with my mother and many other older people who don't understand the words sometimes, or they can get some words and they can understand some lines, and it still has an effect of a certain kind. So do you think the words and the detailed understanding of words
really matters?
is more useful, or the plunging into the waters of that bhajan or that bani? Because even you, I felt today, you are a little thrashing about rather than fully enjoying the water. So I thought I'd ask.
Okay.
I'm sorry for being a bit.
No, please.
In the Kabir tradition, what has to be.
It's refreshing to have a real conversation rather than a polite one. So you feel I'm intellectualizing it a bit, perhaps.
You are not very comfortable. That's my feeling.
No, actually, I've had a good time talking about this song that is utterly grabbing my state of being right now. And there's been a lot of excitement in sharing that excitement with you. So I'm quite comfortable. I would only say one thing, Chaya, that I feel, when we say that someone doesn't understand, I think we are bringing the burden of our location to that statement. We are bringing the presumption that in order for someone to understand, they have to be able to articulate, which is a no-go, right? So how can we presume someone doesn't understand? There is a wordless understanding that may not be accessed by us over-articulate types in the realm of the spoken word. So, and I think it is there that your mother and your grandmother understand the poem without the burden of too much erudition and learned nuances. But overeducated people like us are, doomed to this task of splitting hairs and, excavating layers of the poem. But it's equally delightful to do this and then sort of let it go and also just sing and experience the music. So that's what I would say.
Urmila, you had wanted to ask a question, and then I'll go to Satya, Savita, and then Arjun. Lots of questions. I'm just trying to.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for such a beautiful session. Questions that came to me was, how did you arrive on this path? Because this is definitely something that is completely into which you are. It is not a, oh, by the way, I also do this kind of thing.
I don't know. I sometimes feel it's like several tributaries at different sources in the mountains, different things that sort of started as small, feeble trickles, and then somehow life created an opportunity for all those tributaries to come together to create this kind of flow or quest in my life. And I think there are many of those kernels or sources that I would point to. One is a deep, deep desire to make peace. I think it's my psycho-spiritual lot in life, to make peace between warring factions, between a very headstrong teenage brother and a very headstrong mother. Growing up in my teenage years, my entire life, my formative years were trying to make peace between them, I've never made this connection. But a lot of my earlier work was geared around making peace in conflict situations in society. A lot of my impulses to work in collaboration with activists, women's activists, Dalit activists, was to bring about sulah in some way. And the Godhra riots were a case in point that made this quest much more tikha for me. And of course, it then moved into a dimension where I realized that really I also need to make peace within. There's a lot of battle happening internally which needs to resolve, many conflicting dualities within myself that need to resolve, which is what this journey showed me. So there was that tributary. There was also a deep inspiration with music, a sense of like my being begins to vibrate to music, like I shared today, that it's a conversation stopper, it's a life stopper. And this happens to me every 3-4 months. Everything will come to a halt because I've heard something and it's come to possess me and I have to give it its due. So a deep spandan or a co-vibration with the spirit of music, and then especially folk music, that was another tributary. Then another tributary is my deep affinity with rural India, with the village. I have some karmic entanglement with the village. It keeps drawing me. All my work, even before the Kabir films, took me there. So like that, there were many strands that came together that brought me on this path of doing what I do right now with poem, song, and mystic.
Thank you so much.
Sadia?
Yes, hello. Hello,
Hi.
शबनम जी, बहुत शुक्रिया आपका, बहुत. I'm speaking from Karachi. Sorry, it's a bit dark, but I hope we can bring you back to Pakistan someday.
I hope so too. I hope so too. So nice to see you.
Yes, very, very lovely. So maybe we'll make that happen someday. For now, बहुत शुक्रिया, और also बहुत शुक्रिया for the Bitai book, which has made its way here, and it's really there's a bunch of us just reading it, giving it to each other, and it's making the
Wow,
round.
I'm so happy to hear that. Thank you so much for revealing yourself, putting on your video, and Hajri bharowing in a sense from Karachi. Thank you so much. It's very meaningful.
Karachi at the back.
Lovely.
So I also just, I feel so liberated by the idea when you spoke about that nothing is original, I feel so freed. I feel so freed when you said that. तो उसका भी शुक्रिया for that reminder. बहुत जरूरी है. भूल जाते हैं. I think we forget. So I have a question because you spoke about the word poetry and how kavita ka istemal it wasn't really used. No one called it poetry. They said it was called bani. So my question is about the word poet or mystic, right? We say mystic poet, we say mystical poet, but what was the language being used then? Like, did Kabir think of himself as a poet or as a mystical poet?
So that's a good question, Sadia. Mystic is a bit of a imposition, an English imposition on a tradition that is actually very vibrantly diverse. If you know, the Sufi, the Baul, the Bhakta, the Bhakti movement, all of this, how do you come up with one word in English to capture all of this? And there is something common underlining all of this. So one uses the word mystic, for lack of a better word. In the tradition itself, Kabir is called a sant. They are called saints. Sant Kavi. The Kavi also does come there, but maybe more in literary Hindi circuits. In the more rooted village oral tradition, Kabir is only a sant. वो संत हो चुके. That's the word they will use.
Thank you. That's great. Thank you.
I just saw that Srilata had raised the hand, but I don't know if they're still around.
No, I am around, but I think the question I wanted to ask somebody else sort of did gesture to it. But hello, Shabnam. After so many years, years
Nice
ago
to see
we
you,
met at
Srilata.
IIT. Yes.
Nice to see you here. Wonderful.
Yeah, and I too had the same question about this amazing journey that you have made. The same observation, from being, in a sense, someone who was a little bit like maybe out of the frame when I met you, I think, but now you're in it. You're it. So I'm so lovely to see this and such an inspiration actually. Thank you.
Thank you, Srilata, and thank you for that sharp comment. Yes, I was out of the frame when we met. That was maybe 20 years ago, right?
Close to, yes.
Yes.
Yeah. I still have all your movies, and all our students have seen it.
Yes.
Watch the movies.
Thank you.
Arjun, would you like to ask? Sorry, I have to rush because there are many hands. And
Prashant, I think Savita ma'am had raised a hand before me.
Savita, yeah.
After she goes, I'll.
Yeah, sure.
So first of all, I want to say that I am very thankful, Arjun, that you invited me. And this evening has very easily become one of those evenings which I would categorize as special. And not because of what Shabnam has been talking about, but the way she has articulated. The articulation does not hurt at all an experience that one wants to convey or bring to the audience or to the table. Here we are all friends, and we are more or less, all of us are either as poets or musicians or thinkers. We are on the same journey. Shabnam is a little ahead of us, I felt this evening. Because, the way she began to talk about the subtle, which is generally, we go to the notion of subtle philosophically. She seems to have arrived there experience, because she spoke about it with such authority. For example, the ease with which she talked about how the subtle can come to us, or it can become light for us. Just a few days ago, I wrote a poem in which I mentioned that it is the same light that falls on me, which falls on leaves, branches of tree, or the river, the mountain. It's just this. When the poet notices this, the singer feels it while singing. And Shabnam has done a wonderful job by talking about it. Very few people can actually have courage to talk about it. Because, you'll be considered someone as an imposter. You have to be a saint or a spiritual person yourself to be able to talk about a reality which is beyond the duality in which we are caught up. And most of our intellectual work basically thrives on creating categories which maintain and sustain duality. And yet we keep on saying hypocritically that we want to go beyond it. So if she has anything more to say about that subtle thing, that one pin that can open up the universe, light can just gush out, that would be wonderful if she can talk a little bit more about it.
Sabita, I'm very moved by the fact that in this tradition, you will hear Kabir speak with tremendous assurance and authority about being there in that non-dual state of samadhi and experience. And that same Kabir will express helplessness, vulnerability about being not one with that state, of yearning for that state, of being bound in the dual and wanting to taste that. And that gives me a lot of heart. And that's why I say, Guru is fine. Yes, Guru, but Sa Hirdaya, poet as a friend, as a very intimate friend. So I'm not saying he was not an arrived soul. People might sort of lynch me for this. But I'm saying that he expresses the full gamut of the human experience. Shah Latif, even more so than Kabir, much, much more so than Kabir, will express the vulnerability of this path, of the momentary opening up of a portal. This pinhead or this spark that, suddenly creates light on the whole universe. And sometimes when we feel freed from all the burden of all the things, the dual frameworks that weigh us down, sometimes momentarily you feel that and you suddenly come vibrantly alive. There's no scope then to feel sorry for yourself, I'm alone, or to feel like you're observing an experience. You are it, and it's so momentary, and it feels like we live our lives like flightless birds in some ways. And that moment, suddenly we take flight. We recognize our capacity to fly, to soar, to be free. Aisa bhi hota hai. You taste it, and then fatak say you're back with a rude shock on the earth, again flightless, because you're again stuck in your mental patterns. So kabhi kabhi wo aata hai, and it's a call.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I know did I say that I go to that moment quite often, come back after Thursday, unable to actually see the entire power and force of this bright light. But yes, poetry comes that way. That's where one goes for it.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Arjun, do you want to go next?
Yeah. Thank you, Shabnam. Thank you for being here with us at TQT. We're truly honored and delighted. And what you were talking about, the tiny and duality and all of that, I'm going to make a departure here from what everybody else said. So this actually, I have quite a fascination for particle physics. So the duality you spoke of that exists in the very nature of light itself, right? Light can be a wave, light can be a particle, and physicists have been wrestling with this duality for decades now. Einstein has, Bohr has, and modern physicists, this is the greatest quandary. And somehow I see this quandary, this puzzle of the universe, the cosmos itself, to find a unified theory being reflected somehow, or directly in the poems of Kabir, who existed long before modern physics even came into being.
Yes.
And that's what is so surprising for me. And also the power of the tiny you spoke of, and the truth of the tiny, it being in the tiniest places, and the subtlety which exists in these zones, which cannot be identified, and the ambiguities of there being 7 dimensions, 13 dimensions of reality. And I'm wondering if they have if these poets, because mystic again, Borges, I was just reading Borges, and he said that language has limitations, severe limitations, right? You cannot, the word poet it's a very limited thing. He said all nouns are abbreviations, so we are operating on abbreviations. We cannot truly understand the meaning of mystic or even poet. But do you think perhaps they had some sort of intuitive, understanding of the universe or the cosmos, which, even which baffles, I mean, have you ever felt that way? That this is, I mean, these are all the same paths. They are looking at a more empirical sort of approach through their language, their poetry is their language, their words are mathematics and equations. And mystics words, I mean, their languages, of course, poems and chants.
So Arjun, thank you. In one word, I'll answer your very erudite and beautiful, insightful question. Yes. Yes, I think everything you have said is in fact the case. And it is not surprising that the Dalai Lama has instituted a series of dialogues with senior physicists to bring these two worlds into a dialogue with each other. And say Buddhist practitioners like Alan Wallace will argue that, I mean, not just him, I heard him say this, that the scientific principle is one that seeks to understand the nature of reality outside. The spiritual principle is one that invites you to understand the nature of reality inside. And by inside, I don't only mean psychology, like thoughts and emotions. By inside, I also mean the physical nature of the inside, where again subtlety comes into play, where yogis have fine-tuned their quietude of the mind to such a fine-tuned subtle degree that they are able to apprehend blood coursing through their veins, pulsations, throbs, flows, energies in the inner body universe, which we cannot fathom, which are expressed in this poetry. And so they're equally of a scientific temper, the mystic and they're both investigating realities, albeit different ones, the outer and the inner. And the only difference that one could say is the case is that one kind of knowledge is not, maybe I shouldn't say this, but I'll say it anyway, it can be provocative, is not transformative. Knowledge of the outer world is all said and done information. Maybe that's not true, but I'm saying it. Knowledge of the self, the same kind of knowledge of the self that takes you to the same realizations that you were pointing out, can transform you, your state of being. So I think there's an adage that says knowledge is that which liberates. So if it doesn't transform you by knowing all these things, non-dual nature of the world and yourself, then what knowledge is that? That is something that is repeatedly said in the tradition, and poem after poem by Kabir and all of them. They really trash traditional knowledge, because where does it get you? Okay, more and more pothis, more and more tomes of learning, but did it work alchemically on your spirit? It didn't. So they will argue for a kind of knowledge that is fiercely turning that same inquiring gaze within. Something like that.
Thank you very much.
Great. Should we go to Samreen and then Kali?
Thank you, Prashant. Thank you so much, Shabnam ji, for this evening. It's been truly enlightening, and I want to thank you first and foremost for reminding us of the poetics of recognition instead of just the poetics of originality, and also for introducing the word Sahridaya to us, someone who is of the same heart. It's making me think of the heart as a region, and the way we say, "Ye mere mulk ka hai, ye mere dil ka hai."
So lovely.
Really loved that. So my sawal is a little lamba. I work in the field of political psychology, and I'm mostly interested in allyship and solidarity between groups of different ethnicities and religions. And you mentioned that the oral traditions of bhakti lie beyond the realms of any religious framework. And I feel like this can be a big tool in the unification of different groups. How does one go about communicating this lack of religious framework of the oral traditions to, let's say, like in a common parlance? That's my question.
How do you communicate it in the common parlance, by which you mean?
How do we persuade people who don't engage with the oral traditions directly of their impact and effectiveness? Or how do we make them see it as something that is not heavily influenced by religion, but is more influenced by the spirit?
I'm not sure how really to answer this question. A lot of people will quibble with this duality that is being created right here, that I've also contributed to, of something as religious and something as spiritual. Somewhere much like the yin and the yang, the spiritual is at the heart of the religious too. And that which goes by the name of only spiritual creates its own ossified structures that we recognize as religion, right? So first, let us signal the dangers of creating this duality, right? Because when you create a duality like this, you are already casting a prejudiced gaze at those religious people out there, you know, the people creating all the trouble in society, which is not helpful at all. Because those religious people out there are not all rioters and people creating trouble. There are deep practitioners who are in very religious frameworks. So let us give up our holier than thou-ness, that we are spiritual seekers only and don't, you know. And I'm saying this not only to you, I'm saying it to myself, because sometimes one slides into this, that, oh, that's institutionalized, that's religious. So let's not fall into this duality. Let us try and excavate the spiritual in the religious and alert ourselves always to the religious in our spiritual. Maybe that's the way to go. It's a little more difficult to do, because again, it's trying to walk that narrow non-dual path, you know, where you're not again for creating yet another duality.
Alim.
Hello. Hello. Hi.
Hi.
I'll be really quick. I'll be there always has to be one relatively annoying person who goes, I have more of a comment than a question. So I'll be that. I'm used to of that now, but I'll make it quick.
I actually lost your voice, Kaleem. So can you just repeat what you just said? You blanked out.
Okay, that's okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll just start. I'm really grateful for this gathering. I feel full. I really feel full despite the fact that I skipped lunch today, but I feel full after this gathering. And I really feel like this gathering of not just like perceptions and sound. And I also really, really appreciate how there was sound present, that you were singing, but then you were also so generously sharing so much with us. So I'm Kaleem. I'm 22 and I'm from Karachi, Pakistan also. And Sadia, by the way, who just spoke, Sadia and I became friends. Also, we bonded very primarily over Ajab Sheher and Kabir. So just a couple evenings ago, we met and Sadia referred to me as her Kabir friend. So that's also something that's there. But nevertheless, I really, really specifically appreciated what you said about intimacy and its many dimensions. I look forward to looking into the book that you referred to. But there's a couple lines, if I may add, that have really, like, whenever I think of Kabir, I think of these two lines. Kabira कुआं एक है पानी भरे हुनैर भांडे में ही भेद है पानी सब में एक. So there's a very specific kind of I think intimacy that is present even within just such an image, if we were to think of it, because the entire chat that we've been having so far, knowing and being able to articulate it, it's also, I think, important to remember that in a lot of our ancestral modes of thinking, knowing and being is not a different thing. It's just there. It's very much just there. And when we also look into perhaps a more, because you said it's not just a sort of a very happy go psychotherapy moment. When we also look at violences happening over the name of perhaps sort of rising fascism on that side of the border or this side of the border, and how much of sort of the vocabulary of difference, how it's inhabited. But then we look at Kabir and we look at this image of like different bhande but same pani. Then at the end, it's also because I don't know where I end and where you begin. So this evening was actually a really, really important reminder for me for that. So thank you once again. I'm really grateful.
Thank you so much, Kaleem. It's so special to hear you on this forum. Like I said to Sadia, so बहुत ही दिल से शुक्रिया इस connection के लिए. There is a Doha of Kabir that will extend this idea that you have just shared. जल में कुंभ में जल है, बाहर भीतर पानी, फूटा कुंभ जल जल ही समाना, ये सब अकथ कहानी. So Kabir is here, a slightly different angle on that image of the pot and the water that you highlighted for us, that the water is the same, our pots are different. And here he's saying, okay, let's look at one pot, that ego self, that fragile earthen vessel that is holding water. And he's saying outside, inside water. It's a pot full of water, inside water, outside, inside water. The pot breaks, water merges with water. And then he ends by saying, this is an untellable tale. अकथ कहानी, इसकी बात नहीं की जा सकती. So
wonderful.
You on that one.
If there are no questions, I'd like to bring up a request in the chat by Jigar, who has said, O Chintu Koi Mane is your masterpiece. Can I request to hear 2 lines from you?
That you want me to perform, Prashant? Is that the cue for me to burst into song?
No, I'm just alerting you that this has come. And of course, the comments, there are many comments thanking you, and people have picked up certain phrases which they have really related to.
Right.
So you can look at it, because I don't know how many things to read.
So if there are no more questions, I could Yes, I could sing two lines of Ochintu, but I'd actually like to end on a song, if I may, like a whole
Yeah, yeah,
song.
yeah.
And it's
Yes.
going to be a Dhruv Dada song, but another one which sort of reminded me of just everything we have been talking about this evening. You know, in preparing the notes for this evening's conversation, I kept returning to this one phrase of a poem by Dhruv Bhatt, who's a contemporary poet who I love dearly, and I think he's quite the mystic. And this is a phrase from a poem of his which says, which captures this idea that we have been talking about of intimacy with this present moment. So easy to say, so hard to do. So he says, Palma.
Shabnam, I'm really sorry. I think the position of the mic was slightly different. Your voice is better when it was slightly closer to the mic.
Hello, is that better?
Yeah.
પલમાં ઝાલી પલને કોઈ સાચવે તો એ પલમાં પહોંચી જાય છેડા લગ. Okay, I'll translate this. He's saying, in the moment, palma jhali pal, in the moment, if you can grasp the moment, jhali pal, ne koi sachve, and then if you can cherish it, to e pal ma pahunchi jaye chheda lag. So then in just that one pal or instant, you reach eternity. It's exactly this idea that we have been talking about. And it's a deceptively simple song. He says, Ek pa lehere dariyo ani kor madhuri dharti fore jai chheda lag. On this side I see the waves of the ocean, and there I see this fragrant earth stretching out in front of me. On the other side, Simma uthe damari waro par asuraj tarko dhole jai chheda lag. And in the distance I see the sun pouring its sunshine into a rising whirlwind. So he's set the stage, right? Then he says, Apane lilu ghas. So this is a song that in every image is trying to reach out beyond the limits, the confines of your defined self. So what is happening here? Apane lilu ghas. I am the green earth. Green grass, ghas. Ne lila ghas ne evi mansha ke akash bhari daun. But this green grass has such a mansha, a wish, that it fills the blue sky. हेत करी लऊं हरणा ने बे वात करी लऊं वायरा साथे नाच करी लऊं. To love the frolicking fawn and to dance with the wind. हाथ धरो तो हाथ झाली लऊं एवड़ो के आ जिंदगी जोड़े जाए छेड़ा लग. Grasping your hand thus that we are never parted till ever and ever, you know. And hear the kernel of the song. Jalne evi reet ne ene urma ke ene urma jale vijli to varsad kari de. So it is in the nature of water. Jalne evi reet. वो उसकी ऐसी रीत है, जल की रीत है. क्या रीत है? कि एने ऊर्मा जले बिजली. If in its heart there is lightning, there is heat, तो ये बरसात करी दे. Then it just bursts it into rain. पिंडनु आँखों पोत बरी ने गीत बने ते पल ने जरी याद करी ले. So that moment of lightning is that of heat, that of fire, that can actually just burn yourself, the fabric of yourself. And he says, in that moment where lightning burns your pind, yourself, in that moment, a song is born. Geet bane, te pal ne jari yaad kari le. Remember that moment. I'm not doing a great job of translating, so forgive me. It's really quite magical in the original. Pal ma jhali pal ne koi sachwe to e pal ma pahunchi jaye chheda lag. So in that moment of erasure of the self, when lightning melts you to water, to rain, where you dissolve and a song is born. If you can grasp that moment, hold that moment, cherish that moment, then you enter the eternal. You pahunchi jao chheda lag. So I think it's about the spark that lit the world, really. It's that exact same idea. So this is a song in Gujarati by Dhruv Dada. लहरे दरियो आने कोर मधुरे धरती फोरे जाए छेड़ा लग एक लहरे दरियो आने कोर मधुरे धरती फोरे जाए छेड़ा लग सिम्मा उठे डमरी आरो पर असुरज तड़को ढोड़े जाए छेड़ा लग उठे डमरियारो पर असुरज तड़को ढोड़े जाए छेड़ा लग जलने वीरित अपने लीलो घास ने लीला घास नयनी मन शके आकाश भरी दऊं अपने लीलो घास ने लीला घास नयनी मन शके आकाश भरी दऊं हेत करी लाऊं हरणा ने बे बात करी लाऊं वायरा साथे नाच करी लाऊं हेत करी लाऊं हरणा ने बे बात करी लाऊं वायरा साथे नाच करी लाऊं हाथ धरो तो हाथ झाली लाऊं एवड़ो के आ जिंदगी जोड़े जाए छेड़ा लग धरो तो हाथ झाली लाऊं एवड़ो के आ जिंदगी जोड़े जाए छेड़ा लग सिम्मा उठे डमरी आरो पर असुरज तड़को ढोड़े जाए छेड़ा लग जलने वीरित कहने और मजले बिजली तो बरसात करी दे जलने वीरित कहने और मजले बिजली तो बरसात करी दे पिंड नु आँखों पोत भरी ने गीत बने ते पल ने जरी याद करी ले पिंड नु आँखों पोत भरी ने गीत बने ते पल ने जरी याद करी ले पल मा झाली पल ने कोई साचवे तो ए पल मा पहुंची जाए छेड़ा लग पल मा झाली पल ने कोई साचवे तो ए पल मा पहुंची जाए छेड़ा लग सिम्मा उठे डमरी आरो पर असुरज तड़को ढोले जाए छेड़ा लग एक लहरे दरियो आड़ी कोर मधुरे धरती फोरे जाए छेड़ा लग एक लहरे दरियो आड़ी कोर मधुरे धरती फोरे जाए छेड़ा लग
Prashant?
Yes.
Sorry, can we request an encore, please, of another song, ma'am? Please, do us the honor. I mean, we just want.
Is there a song you have in mind?
I do not, but if somebody else, I'm sure.
Okay. What should I sing? Any ideas, any suggestions that speak to the moment?
Achi Mil Yaar.
Yeah?
Achi Mil Yaar.
Achi Mil Yaar.
I love that.
All right. We'll do Achi Mil Yaar. Who said they like this song very much? Can I?
Shabnam Virmani.
Achi Milyar is an unusual. Sadia.
No, Shabnam Chandani.
Okay. I'm going to ask whoever asked for that song to tell everybody a little bit about it while I get my my tambura and tune up for it.
Oh, I think it is Shah Sahib's song.
Yes.
And it puts me in sort of a kind of bliss that has no name, really. And the way you sing it, it really, the words have wings back to another time. Very beautifully.
So it's a song by Shah Abdul Latif Bhetai in which Sohini is. I'm going to ask Prashant to lay the stage for this song because I'm tuning up. Prashant, go for it.
Okay. So Shalati famously always wrote poems drawing from the folklore of Sindh, and he particularly sort of composed poems around love legends. And one of the most famous love legends, of course, is the love story of Sohini and Nihar. And this song is a song where Sohini, it's I think in the voice of Sohini. I'm sorry, I don't remember all the words, but it's in the voice of Sohini, and she's saying, "Come and meet now to Mehar, Achi Milyar Yar Mehar."
Can I add to that, Prashant?
Yes, please. I would be very glad. Sadia, are you speaking? We can't hear you.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, I think just what's key about this song is that Soni is saying, because the story is that one night, because Soni goes to meet Mehar across the river on this fully baked pot. And one night, she has, the pot is not fully baked, it's half baked. She's been set up for disaster and death and reunion. But, so she drowns along the way because the pot is not fully baked. So in this song, Soni is saying, but how can I blame the pot when my actions are half baked? So if I'm correct, the translation.
Yes. That's very well put. How can you blame the potter if your actions are half baked? I'm just posting the lyrics in the chat box here. In Devanagari, unfortunately.
kamini ko na kamayo re ala.
Ah, wonderful. I'm sorry we didn't tell the story of Sohini before the song, but I've posted in the chat if anybody is interested. And yeah.
Wow, what a beautiful conversation with all of you. Thank you so much. It's really been very special.
Yes, and thank you so much, Shabnam. It's always so wonderful and fulfilling. And one of the things that, I mean, I remember that I was once reading an interview of yours and somebody asked, like, this rapid fire kind of questions. And
Have
somebody
we
asked,
lost Prashant?
Yeah.
Prashant, we lost you for a bit.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Can you hear me now?
Or am I the only one who couldn't hear him?
We lost you. Okay. Yeah. So I was just saying that I remember once reading an interview of Shabnam where somebody was asking us some rapid fire kind of questions, and somebody asked, so what is the thing that you like the most? And she immediately said sharing. And I think that's the spirit with which Shabnam comes to every session. And truly, you feel a sense of sharing, partaking, and intimacy. And for that, Shabnam, thank you. Thank you so much. And I also would like to quickly thank the team behind Ways of Verse and the Pankaj Khewani Prize, the team of TQT, my fellow compatriots, comrades, friends, so many people, but especially Kinjal and Sony. Kinjal, who's the chair of the DK Prize, and Sony, who has been putting all his might with design and publicity. Yashasvi and Sumit for all the social media support. Of course, Shobna, Arjun for being the co-curators, and all the people. I'm sorry, I might be missing some names here, but thank you all for this. I also want to leave you all with, and I think Shabnam, you would appreciate that. I also want to say has ignited some spark and you want to, delve deep.
We lost you again. Prashant, just repeat the last line.
Oh no, I'm so sorry.
Just the last line. No, just the last
line. I wanted to share the link of Ajab Sheher, which is the archive that Shabnam and I work on. So that if you, there's much more, as they say, Alak Bharya Hai Bhandar. So there's a lot more, and Shabnam, I think, has opened such a beautiful window for a lot of us. So please go and immerse yourself in this work. And yeah, that's about it from my side. Thank you all for this wonderful evening, and good night.
And we shall pay our dil se salams to our friends from across the border.
Yes.
Yeah, especially, thank you to all our friends from across the border who made the time to be here today, and thank you. And also, you're welcome to join our community. You will find us very hospitable, and everybody here, from across the border.
Some of the joys of online.